You're listening to the Author Stories Podcast, bringing you the story behind the stories and the storytellers.
Margaret White,
Terry Brooks,
Sheena Kamal,
Matthew Quick,
JT Ellison,
Walt D. Williams,
Brad Ford, Corey Doctorow,
Brandon Sanderson,
Robin Mock,
Ernest Klein, Jim Butcher,
Charlene Harris.
Visit hankgarner.com for archives of all the shows. Today's guest is Well, thanks for joining me again for the Author Stories Podcast, where I bring you the story behind the stories and the storytellers. It is episode 1000. We made it, and I am super excited to share the celebration of this momentous occasion with one of my absolute favorite authors in the whole world, and one of my favorite guests on top of that, Craig Johnson. Welcome back to the show, buddy.
Oh, my friend, you are overly kind. Congratulations on your 1000th entry here. This is pretty amazing.
Wow. It's crazy. I think we've been doing this once a year for like the last 6 years, and it's always the highlight of my fall. You know, not only do I get a new Walt Longmire book, but we get to have Craig to come on and talk all about Walt and writing and all of that good stuff. So it's always a pleasure to have you back.
Thank you. My pleasure. Please.
So, Craig, Next to Last Stand. This is the 16th Walt Longmire mystery. Is that right?
It is. It's hard for me to believe that because I feel like I've only been writing for a couple of years. But evidently, I've been doing this for about 17 years now. Like that. So I guess that means I must be having a good time, right? Time is flying.
I think so. The last few books have taken some twists and turns. You know, a couple of books ago, Walt goes down to Mexico, and there was a completely different type of Longmire mystery that spanned 2 books. And then last year, he's Walt's back home, kind of licking his wounds, so to speak. And, mysteries never stop. And, things happen with the wolves and things like that. This book takes another turn that I didn't expect. Tell me a little bit about. Well, first off, let's talk about what different direction you take this time, because this is a unique mystery for Walt in that it's a heist novel, and I love it. I absolutely love that the new direction and kind of. First off, what's the greatest heist story in your estimation? What is there a story that just kind of rocked your socks?
Oh my goodness! There's so many of them. To try and choose from like that, but the difficulty, of course, is how do you write something along those lines that includes the least populated county in the least populated state of America? That was the difficulty. It was and then also you obviously want something like that. It can't just be some jewel that has no connection or anything
Sure.
either Wyoming or the American West, or something along those lines. And so I guess, for me, the catalyst, I guess, for the whole idea became that painting, that I guess has been referred to as the most viewed by questionable, inebriated art critics in American history. So, and I know that to tell your listeners, about this, I have to kind of give a brief art history lesson like that, because I can just about guarantee that the majority of your listeners have not heard of the artist Cavalry Adams like that, but I can just about guess that the majority of them have actually seen his work, that they've seen his most monumental work, at Custer's Last Fight. And the reason behind that, of course, being that he painted the painting about 10 years after the Battle of the Little Bighorn in 1876, and it toured the U.S. and then went back to St. Louis, where Cavalry Adams called home. And they weren't quite sure what to do with the painting. I mean, it was 16 and a half by 10 feet tall. And so it was sold, to a saloon keeper near the train station there in St. Louis, and put up on his wall as a kind of a conversation piece. You would have people between trains. They would come in, and have a beer and look up, and discuss, the Little Bighorn battle, which had always been a major point of contention, in American history, simply because it was a battle that we lost. Right. And this was a technologically advanced country that was playing double headers back in Chicago, while the 7th Cavalry met its defeat, out there on the banks of the Little Bighorn Little Bighorn River. And so anyway, it hung there for a number of years, and then what happened, of course, is what happens with a lot of these type of establishments. It went out of business, it went bankrupt. And so, one of the largest creditors they had there in St. Louis was a then small brewery by the name of Budweiser. And Augie-Busch, never, to let that money float away, marched into the saloon one day, and said, "Hey, you owe me $30,000 for all the beer. What are you going to do?" And they said, "We're bankrupt. We don't have any money." And he looked up on the wall and said, "I'll take the painting." So they peeled the painting off the wall. He rolls it under his arms. He walks back up to the brewery, rolls it out on a table there in front of his merchandising guys and says, "All right, we're going to make posters. We're going to make posters of this painting, and we're going to put Budweiser down there on the bottom, and we're going to send them to every bar, every saloon, every restaurant in the American West, as long as they're carrying Budweiser beer. And by the time we're done with this promotion, we're going to be a much larger brewery." And boy, did it work. With a vengeance, it worked. Anheuser-Busch became one of the largest breweries in the world. And Custer's Last Fight came to occupy wall space in every single saloon, every single bar, every single restaurant in the American West, and sometimes all over the world. I've had, people have written me and taken pictures, of this particular painting or poster rather, or print, hanging in, bars in Paris, in London, and all over the world like that. And so anyway, it became, a fixture. And once, Augie-Busch got his money out of it, he decided, what the heck, in a fit of philanthropic zeal, he decided he would give the painting to the 7th Cavalry, which at that point in time was based in Fort Bliss, Texas, just outside of El Paso. He gave the painting to them, and it hung on their officers' club and commissary wall until 1946, when the commissary burned to the ground and the painting was lost. Or was it? And therein lies the MacGuffin, for this particular book. This painting might still be out there floating around and existing. And if it does, it's worth like $25 to $30 million simply because of the cultural space that it inhabits in American history. And then, of course, the difficulty became, trying to, make this be something that would be, that would involve the sheriff of the least populated county or least populated state there in Absaroka County. The fortunate aspect of it being that we have the Fort McKinney Veterans Home just outside of Buffalo that's been there since, a couple of years after 1876 in response to the Little Bighorn battle, and became the Veterans Home of Wyoming. And so I asked the local sheriff, I said, have you guys ever had any interaction with the Veterans Home? And they said, oh, yeah, whenever these guys pass away, the Foot Lockers might have things in them that, maybe shouldn't be there, whether it be weapons or ammunition or something like that. And we're called to go in and pick up those things and take them away. Well, they also find a Forsheim shoebox with $1 million in it. Opens up a mysterious past, for Charlie Lee Stillwater, one of the veterans, and one of the waivers, who sits out in front of the Wyoming Veterans Home and waves of traffic. And I thought that's probably the conditions that Walt will find himself in.
I love it. I've often wondered how this painting became synonymous with Budweiser beer, and like what would connect these two seemingly at odd, well, not at odds, but totally disconnected. And that's a fascinating story. One reason that we're so fascinated with history is because there are these crazy disconnected connections that we just can't see from modern times. Is that, I understand the political connections and all of that about why people still visit the Little Bighorn and debate this. But is it because people are looking for lost connections? Like why do we still obsess over historical events and connections like this?
Well, I think that there's an ambiguity, to the Battle of the Little Bighorn, which lends itself. There's a mystery, and you're never going to hear me badmouth mystery.
Right.
It's always going to be a great way to get the reader involved. Whenever you have that cipher of 4 plus X equals 8, you're going to automatically think, well, what is X? And try and solve that problem. And I think that, of course, as a historical reference, historians have been trying to figure out, what is X, with the Little Bighorn, what it was that happened. And especially since, one side didn't have any, survivors, for the Custer's literal command, there were no survivors other than a horse. And the horse was unavailable for comment, and so we kind of had to rely, on the other side to come up, with what it was that actually happened. And that's, kind of been, kind of held in abeyance, an awful lot, because Libby Custer, mounted a campaign, to make sure that Custer was revered as, a hero, for American youth. And there was an awful lot of material that was brought about by the American military and the American history. But it kind of neglected to give voice to the natives, who were also a major portion of this particular battle. And, where we finally, got to finally hear a little bit of those voices, not only the voices of 13 and 14-year-old warriors, that were actually participating in that battle, who the transcriptions, of their, experiences in the battles, were unearthed but also, in the modern day, James Welch's marvelous book, Killing Custer, to discover, what were the resonances, within Indian country from that particular battle And it's just going to be something that's going to be a cipher that's always going to be a question. I mean, they still bring cadets, from West Point up to the Little Bighorn battlefield to try and teach them, that you do not divide your battle forces into 3 portions before you see what's the size of the antagonist you're going to have to be taking on. There are a lot of questions that are still unanswered. And, for me, that's always going to be an interesting point. And then the native voices, to come across them and to be able to give them voice to what it was that happened in that sunny afternoon, in the banks of the Little Bighorn in 1876.
Well, Craig, we always look at history through a particular lens, and for all of us, those lenses are different. In Absaroka County, there's another lens to view history through. And what is the Absaroka County take on the incident that we're talking about here?
Well, that's exemplified pretty much, from Walt Longmire, the sheriff and protagonist in the books, and also from Henry Standing Bear. I mean, Henry, one of my favorite scenes some of my favorite scenes in the books are, when Walt and Henry are, kind of battling back and forth as to what it was, even the name, of the battle. For the natives, the battle was called the Battle of the Greasy Grass. It was not called the Battle of the Little Bighorn. And so there was a lot of controversy as to whether they were talking about the same battle an awful lot of the time. And then, you've also got the history of these type of things, in that after doing research for about 8 years, on this particular novel, I can tell you that, that with all of the books that I read, there are a lot of really bad Custer and Little Bighorn books out there that have been written that really bear no resemblance to the reality of what it was that happened. And so I'm kind of pleased, that it's gotten a re-examination, by a lot of really wonderful writers nowadays. But, that's always going to be the case. And the only thing that can give any kind of competition to the amount of really bad books that have been written about the Little Bighorn, or the amount of movies and television shows that have been written about the Little Bighorn that bear absolutely no resemblance to reality whatsoever. And one of my favorite scenes is the one where they're actually watching a Little Bighorn movie festival on TMC. There at the Red Pony Bar and Grill, and to see the different perspectives that both Walt and Henry have been taught, over the years, how ludicrously, unbearing with any of the facts, that a lot of these movies had. And so that's kind of fun too, to kind of try and set the record straight and maybe get some information out there that maybe, and certainly some details that weren't available up until, most recently.
Both Barrels Publishing is the brainchild of successful indie author James P. Sumner. He has self-published over 15 titles in the last 5 years and has over 800,000 downloads so far in his career, meaning he has a wealth of knowledge and experience to share with the indie publishing community. Knowing the struggles of the modern-day indie author as well as he does, he wanted to create a platform that would allow writers of any level to learn the ropes, navigate the pitfalls, and produce a professional novel without wasting time or money in the process. Both Barrels Publishing is the perfect one-stop shop for any indie author, combining James's expertise with his own team of editors and designers so you can help your novel realize its full potential and learn how to publish yourself. The purpose of Both Barrels Publishing is to help indie authors get their novels ready for publication without all the stress, hassle, and unnecessary expense. We want to make your lives easier, which is why we're giving you access to a top-notch team to publish your novels, along with a generous discount on their services. You can also work one-on-one with James to learn the intricacies of self-publishing. No hidden cost, no false promises. We simply want you to publish the best version of your novel. BothBarrelsPublishing.com. A hitman with a conscience. Ian Bragg is paid to kill people. Only bad people and not many, but for a great deal of money. Case the target. Make the hit. Move on until he meets the woman with sparkling green eyes who changes everything. A few pre-readers had this to say about Ian Bragg. Mark Dawson, million-selling thriller author, says a rip-roaring ride from start to breathless finish. Craig Martell hit a home run with The Operator. The taut, lean prose and lightning-fast pace make this a page-turner without sacrificing an ounce of story or depth. You'll find yourself rooting for the hitman main character as he faces the toughest decision of his career. The Operator is the start of a new thriller series I expect to see burning up bestseller list for years to come, says A.C. Fuller, author of The Crime Beat and Alex Vane media thrillers. Suave, romantic, and lethal, Ian Bragg is everything you want in a highly paid assassin. Can't wait to ride this train, says James Blatch, self-publishing formula. It's been a long time since I fell this hard in love with a book, a very long time. Author of Women of Wine County romantic suspense Terry Wells Brown says. Grab this book from Craig Martell, The Operator. Speaking of Henry Standing Bear, Lou Diamond Phillips was on the show just a few weeks ago talking about his phenomenal new book, The Tinderbox. Uh-huh. And, I had to ask him, about Henry Standing Bear and his connection with that. And one thing that you find is with people that have been involved with Longmire, these are indelible prints that have been put on these people. Like these people, like Lou Diamond will always be Henry Standing Bear. There's a connection there. The same with Robert Taylor, as being the screen version of Walt Longmire. And we've talked before about the difference in Robert Taylor being the visual representation in the TV show and the Walt of the books. They're a little different. But having these people that you have become friends with and still have a connection with today, do these relationships, connections, do they affect the story going forward for you?
Not really. It's an incredibly impactful medium, television. Sure, and the motion pictures. they have a large scale impact, and especially visually. But I had been writing the books for about 7 or 8 years, before Warner Brothers came knocking on the door and said they wanted to make a TV show out of Longmire. And so I had these characters, pretty well solidified in my head. The other thing is that, I'm a victim of what Wallace Stegner used to call the greatest, piece of fiction and literary history is the disclaimer at the beginning of every book that says nobody in this book is based off anybody alive or dead. That's kind of your job, it is to go and find interesting people and, populate your books with them. So a lot of the characters in my books were based off of people that I'm very, very familiar with, people that I know, are related to, have worked with, and so, it's very easy for me to hear those voices, even with the impact of the television show, which was really, really they did a marvelous job, I thought, and producing a television show based off of the books. They did a marvelous job. But yeah, no, it's a separate but equal universe whenever you read the books.
I love it. Well, back to the heist. Stillwater dies in the beginning, and he leaves behind some interesting belongings, and that Walt is called in to investigate. What you mentioned, the $1 million cash earlier, but there's also some books and writings that are found. What was it that brought what the $1 million cash obviously brought the attention of law enforcement and people that want to look into it? But what about these other things? How does the mystery get started?
Well, I mean, the first thing, of course, is that there's a portion of a painting that's found in the footlocker too, and a lot of times, whenever a painter is doing, especially something that's going to be a large scale work, something that's like 16.5 by 9.5 feet tall, they're going to do some smaller paintings, some studies to kind of get a feel, for the light and the color and of some of the more detailed aspects. And the one that Walt, stumbles across, it's a portion of a painting, but it looks vaguely familiar. There's something about it that he feels as though he must have seen it before or something. And as we come to discover, it's actually Rains in the Face, very famous chief, Lakota chief, and we discover that this is a portion of that actual painting, Custer's last fight. And it's only when Walt goes to the bathroom in the Red Pony Bar and Grill, where Henry has chosen to put his shrine to the little Bighorn is actually in the toilet, which kind of gives you his view, on this particular battle. That Walt looks up and sees the actual, poster and notices that portion of the painting, and sets him off on this trail. And that was kind of like the joy of this particular book. Whenever I'm thinking about, doing a Walt Longmire novel, I'm always trying to think of, what's something new, something different, that I haven't done before. And, certainly Walt Longmire had not been involved with anything that was anything remotely, like an art heist. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe this would be something that, would be a little bit different. And it's a little bit lighter hearted book. It gives Walt an opportunity to kind of deal with a situation like that. That's maybe not so much of a life and death situation, at least in the first portions of the book. Things start getting a little bit serious, in the latter part of the book. But in the beginning, he's kind of enjoying himself. This is something that Walt really enjoys doing, is that research. With this particular book, I've been doing research on this book for almost 8 years now. And the reason I knew that it was 8 years was because I saw that one of the episodes, from Longmire actually used it as a subplot in one of their episodes. And I've had a number of people who've contacted me and said, well, did you get the idea, for doing this book, from the television episode? And I'm like, no, they got the idea for the television episode from me telling the producers about it 8 years ago. That kind of gives you an indication of sometimes, this was a real mountain to climb to include this, kind of history in the books. I really had to make sure that I had, all of my, T's crossed, my I's dotted because whenever you delve into something as specific as this particular portion of, Western American history, you better make sure you get it right because there are going to be people out there, they're going to carve you up. No pun intended. If you don't make sure you get all of your facts straight. And so, for me, that was an important point, to not only approach it, from a different perspective, from the perspective of the painting, but to also make sure that you get it right. Like, and after about 8 years of research, I finally felt as though I had enough packed into my head that I could sit down and actually write this book. And hopefully, I won't send anybody off down the trail of being incorrect, because you don't want people, quoting from your books or using your books as research purposes. You got to make sure you get that stuff right. Like, Hollywood's done it wrong for so long. Let's make sure we get it right.
Yeah. Well, speaking of a tonal shift for this book, the last couple of books with Depth of Winter and Land of Wolves have seen Walt take a more serious turn, and the stakes have been extremely high. And the aftermath has been has shown that just how high those stakes have been. With the way 2020 has been this year, that none of us could have predicted. What a joy it was to get a Walt Longmire book that let us take our mind off of the chaos and the crazy that has been this year. Now, obviously, you are not a prophetic voice, standing out west, screaming into the void about what we should expect. But what are your feelings about the way 2020 has been and your response with this book this year?
Well, I mean, I'm a ferocious optimist. I truly am. Like it, and I'm a firm believer, like it, in science, like it, and a firm believer, like it, in American society and culture, like it. And I think, as long as we're listening to the right voices, obviously, like this is a problem that will be overtaken, like that. And the difficulty for me, like that, is when you live in a town of 25 in northern Wyoming. I think I've been in quarantine for the last 17 years. I just haven't been aware of it, like that.
Right.
I kind of miss, being out on the book tours, like I really enjoy, I really enjoy the tours. I really enjoy meeting with the readers and talking with them. That's one of the great joys of my life, like that. But that's only about like 1 month out of my year. The rest of my year is me sitting in a room, locked in a room with my imaginary friends, typing about them, like that. And so, my life really hasn't changed all that much, like that. But I certainly, have, empathy, like for the people who are out there, dealing with these situations, the first, responders, the frontline responders, like that, and and then the people that are dealing in the more, stronger urban areas, like in the larger population bases, like that. I just hope that people are staying safe and doing the right thing. And hey, we're Americans here, like that, and we're all Americans, like that, and looking forward to like helping out our fellow Americans in any way that we can, like that. It's one of the chores that goes along with the job, and one that I think that all true Americans look forward to. That it's an opportunity, something else to overcome, like that, and we will. We will.
Absolutely. Craig, with Next to the Last Stand being the 16th Walt Longmire mystery, does it ever get, do the characters ever become too familiar to you? If you understand what I'm saying, like, is it difficult to find new things to put them into year after year?
Really, I think I was lucky. I think I was very, very fortunate, very, very lucky that I stumbled onto this ensemble, of characters. And, that's one of the great joys of writing a series is that, people read that first book and they think they know these characters. Well, then your job is to, kind of be like a blackjack dealer, who like, is flipping those cards out, and they think they know those characters. And then you flip another card out that sends them in another direction, and then another direction and another direction. And that's kind of the joy of writing a series of books, is discovering that if you've done your job correctly, these characters were never going to stop surprising the reader. Like that, there's always going to be something new to delve into in their character and to find out about them. And and writing each book, in many ways is kind of like, it's like conducting a choral group. You have this group of voices, and you're going to have to pick and choose, which voices it is that are going to exemplify and be able to tell this story to its best benefits. And, that means there's going to be a constant flux of these characters, an ebb and a flow of this ensemble, like that. And after every book, there are emails that I get. There are the emails that say, you beat up on Walt too much in the last book. Do take care of him in the next book, and take it easy on Walt, would you? Which is very complimentary, like that, because that means that they really believe that Walt is real, like that. And,
right.
need to take good care of him, like to make him last, and then the other one is there was not enough of my favorite character, insert name here. Whether there was not enough of Henry in the last book, or there wasn't enough Vic in the last book, or there wasn't enough Lucian in the last book, or Ruby in the last book. I knew I'd reach a certain point whenever I started getting emails of people that said, there really wasn't enough dog in the last book. And so that's very enjoyable too. That these characters are are very close for people like that, and they care about them and worry about them like that, and wait for the next installment just like good friends. An opportunity to meet up with them again like that. And, you don't take anything like that lightly, whenever you're a novelist, you really have to realize that there are responsibilities that go along with that. Some of those responsibilities might be things that, that the readers, are not aware of or don't particularly appreciate like that. But, trying to do something new with each book, trying to not, become formulaic and doing the same thing over and over again. That's part of my responsibilities as an author of a series too.
One of the challenges that you've set for yourself, and that people that are paying attention get to enjoy, is that each Longmire mystery is advancing one season. So you tell a story across the whole year, and we get to experience the world through kind of real-time changes that happen like that. Has that become challenging for you, or is it one of those things that, I know I'm going to have these sort of environmental changes, and that may set up, X or Y for this story? Does it become something that helps you, or is it a challenge that you have to, find ways to solve new puzzles?
No, it's one of the joys. It's one of the joys like that. I mean, anybody that's ever lived, in the Rocky Mountain West knows that July is nothing like January. So that gives me very different, environs, for each book. Now, the difficulty that does create, it's interesting you should bring that up, but the difficulty that it does create is that if I stumble onto a plot for a storyline that I want to use, I have to ask myself, there are two questions I ask myself. The first one is, how is this going to advance the development of these characters? Where are the characters that are going to be impacted by this? Where are they right now? And, what kind of an effect is this going to have on them? And will it advance that? And so, I never want to do a book where the characters are just the same when the book ends as they were at the beginning. I want them, to evolve. I want them to change. That's kind of important to me. The other one is that, I may come up with a storyline such as this one, the one that takes place in Next to Last Stand, that might not fit with the period of, the seasons that, that I'm at this particular time. So I have to kind of take that book and put it on the shelf and kind of wait until the season that, will best exemplify that book comes around. I missed, the winter. I mean, I missed the summer for this particular book, and then came back around like that. And I had to wait, a full year, a full 4 years before I could sit down and actually write this book, because I knew it was a summer book, because they had to go out on the battlefield. They had to be traveling relatively easily, around the high plains. And there just wasn't any way that I could do that as a winter book. I was going to have to wait until summer came back around for Walt Longmire for me to be able to do it, which meant, of course, that Walt would be about a year older, but I thought he could suffer that and be all right.
In South Mississippi, sometimes January is very much just like July. There's not a whole lot of difference in seasons here.
You do have that advantage. You do have that advantage. Also the food and also the music in Mississippi, I have to say. I guess
we get 3 serious weeks of winter most years. So
that snowblower is not getting a great workout then, is what I'm hearing.
No, we use those for leaves. So we lots of oak trees that need leaves cleared. That's usually what those get used for. Oh man, Craig, the new book, Next to Last Stand, is out everywhere now. It's in hardcover or Kindle edition if you prefer that. My favorite way, of course, I have my hardbacks lining my shelf here, but my favorite way to consume Walt Longmire mysteries is audiobooks these days. I absolutely love, and you've had the same narrator all the way through, so Walt has a very specific voice, and I absolutely love it. We're going to put links in the show notes of this episode to make it easy for people to find. What's your opinion on the audiobooks, by the way, while we're here? What do you think about that form?
I can only take a certain amount of credit, for what happened. It was a little bit of a perfect storm there. I had a short story that was in Cowboys and Indians magazine that won the Tony Hillerman short story award. And one of the benefits is that you actually got to go have dinner with Tony Hillerman. And I had only written one book. The Cold Dish was all I had written. And Tony was like on his 20th book or something along those lines. And so I got to sit down and have a 4-hour dinner, with he and his wife, my wife, Judy, and we just hit it off. Tony was an old cowboy from Oklahoma. I'm an old cowboy from Wyoming, and so we kind of hit it off, right?
Yeah.
And one of the things I remember, Tony, at that point in time, I was doing the negotiation for the audiobooks, for the Walt Longmire series. And, Tony offered up the information. He said, well, see if you can get George Guidall as one of your readings, because George Guidall does all of mine. And I've never had to look back. He does a marvelous job. And so the next day I was talking to Recorded Books, and they said, well, we've got a couple of readers we're thinking about. One of them is George Guidall. And I said, him. And they said, you don't want to hear the others? And I was like,
nope.
No, if he's good enough for Tony Hillerman, he's good enough for me. And George has just been an absolute joy. I mean, just an absolute joy to work with. He's just a consummate performer, such a sense of detail in everything that he does. One of the great joys about whenever one of my books comes out is I get that phone call from George where we sit down and we go through the book. And George is, he wants to know the subtext. He wants to know all these different aspects of, the novels that, that maybe a lot of people don't notice, but boy, it has an effect on that audio performance that he does. And I wouldn't trade George for anybody in the world. He's just absolutely magnificent.
Absolutely. I concur and highly recommend the audiobooks. So we'll put links to all of it so people can buy it in whatever form they prefer. Craig, where can people find you online if they want to dig into all the great stuff you're up to?
Oh, there's obviously my website, which is CraigAllenJohnson.com, CraigAllenJohnson.com. We keep all of our information up there that. You can get up to date just about everything. I'm on Facebook, at Craig Johnson Official with a blue check mark. You can find me there. I try and post, just about on a daily basis. I'm on Instagram, as Ucross Pop 25, which is, of course, Ucross Population 25 here in Ucross, and all the fine bookstores everywhere, and maybe some crummy bookstores too. I'm out there in them too, out looking for them.
Craig, it's always a joy and a pleasure to get to hang out with you and catch up. I'm looking forward to next year, and keep those Longmire mysteries coming. We appreciate them.
Absolutely, my appreciation, and let me on your show. I'll see you again next year. Sound good?
Sounds good. Thank you, Craig. Have a great day.
You bet. You too.
On an isolated human planet called Phoenix, outside the Galactic Gate Network, a royal empire teeters on the brink of revolution. The new emperor is weak, the old guard seeks power, and a hidden slave cabal manipulates the great and small houses alike. None of this concerns Simeon Brezhnev, newly appointed steward to one of the most powerful heiresses on the planet. Happy to let the royals play their age-old game of catch the crown, Simeon is more concerned with balancing his mistress's books than worrying about affairs of state. But when Simeon discovers evidence of sedition at the highest levels of government buried deep within her finances, he realizes her great peril. Though a slave, he finds himself trapped in political intrigue, desperate to protect his mistress from the royals who would see her dead and the slave rebels who would make her their pawn. Agonized by the choice of turning her over to the authorities or protecting her secrets, Simeon decides to keep faith with his sovereign over his larger duty, thus flinging himself into a world of power, plot, and assassination. If he fails, they both die, and with them the chance at freedom for Simeon's enslaved race. Set in the Salvage title universe, Salvage Mind is the first of 3 novels in a new breakout series. Available in ebook format and paperback, grab your copy today. Salvage Mind by David Allen Jones.